And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the lecture committee of the Siam Society, welcome to each and every one of you to tonight's edition of our lecture program. We are very fortunate that from today until around the end of March, we will be having a very comprehensive lineup of weekly lecture every Thursday at 7 p.m. this time. Excuse me. At 7 p.m. this time, 7 p.m. Thursday, lectures from distinguished academics and authors. Today, we're also very honored to welcome Dr. Paul Chambers of Naresuan University, who will be presenting his latest achievement in the form of a book titled Praetorian Kingdom, A History of Military Ascendancy in Thailand, which is published under ISEAS Publishing, Yusof Ishak Institute of Singapore. Dr. Paul's main interest is military and civil relations, as well as international affairs in Southeast Asia, with a particular accent in Thailand. Dr. Chambers is a lecturer and special advisor on international affairs at the Center of ASEAN Community Studies, Faculty of Social Sciences at Naresuan University in Pisanulok. He actually traveled the whole way from Pisanulok with a number of his new books, and which is now sold out even before the event start. But we'll link to all of you where to find a copy for yourself later. Dr. Chambers is also a fellow at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore, the German Southeast Asian Center of Excellence for Public Policy and Good Governance, and the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. With his interest in civil and military relations, his recent work, apart from this new book, also includes another book called Khaki Capital, The Political Economy of the Military in Southeast Asia. Just a quick housekeeping announcement before we proceed to the lecture. For any one of you who hadn't been to this lecture before, there is a drink corner just behind you on the right. Restrooms are behind you as well in the foyer on the left and the right. In case of the emergency, all these doors will be open and you can escape. For more information about our lectures, feel free to subscribe or follow our social media channels such as Facebook or Instagram. Right, for now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Chambers to the podium. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul.
Thank you for that very kind and generous welcome. I want to thank the Siam Society and particularly Leah Genovese for having me here. And actually, thank you all for coming. It's quite a pleasure. Thank you. So I'm going to go over this book, and I have to apologize because it's sold out already when you arrived. It's hard to get this book. I think the easiest way is to order it now, because I ordered all these copies myself and then brought them here, and now they're gone. So they're not being sold at a Thai bookstore yet. Okay. Well, the book's 705 pages, and we're not going to go over all that. Instead, looking at it summarily, Okay? And, look at the title there, the Praetorian. What is Praetorian? When I thought about it, naming this book, I was thinking about the Roman Praetorian Guard. Because in ancient Rome, the guard protected the emperor. But sometimes there were coups. And it happened. And also, if you look at the idea of a Praetorian state, that is an idea that's come out in social sciences and such. The idea that a military intervenes quite frequently in state activities. And we've seen such militaries before in different countries of the world. But maybe Thailand has had a different history because it's a kingdom. And so that's why I came out with the title Praetorian Kingdom. Now, the book was written primarily because, a lot of books have been written in Thailand or about Thailand, about political parties, NGOs, art, archaeology, etc. And there have been books written about the military. Kind of in the past, there were books more written about the military. But the institution of military, I think, needs to be examined again. Okay? Because really the last time you had a major book on the Thai military was back in the 1980s. So it's been some time. So it's about time. That's why this book was written, really. So when did the Thai military begin? Well, if you look through long ago history, there wasn't a military in the sense of a 24-hour permanent standing military. There wasn't. Okay, in Sukhothai, Ayutthaya, Siam, until 1852. Okay, only then, under King Rama IV, do you see the beginnings of an institutionalized military. And I like to say institutionalized because it means that the military is always there. All right? So once you begin to have that in leaps and bounds, the palace came to rely on the armed forces to help consolidate power over a spreading kingdom. Okay? No surprise. And of course then, the origins of Siam's early security forces were in the 1800s in terms of a permanent standing army. Okay. But at the very top of this army were different princes who wielded enormous power. It wasn't that important an army at the time because, of course, the colonial powers of France and Britain were right next door. But in terms of domestic politics, little by little, the army began to become more important. And so in my book, you'll see lots of information about the Bunag family, which was very key to the evolution of the early military. But also there were foreigners who helped to train and to lead the army, the navy, and the police. The police, which was created in 1860, okay, had a whole bunch of foreign commanders at the time. It's kind of so I talk about this throughout the early parts of this long book. Jumping ahead. So we discuss in the book the Paiwat of 1932, June 24th, 1932. But in terms of a military history, because this is military history, it's interpreted more as a coup because of the military's involvement in it. I'm looking just at the military's involvement, okay? And there was a Paiwat, which was led by a military-civilian alliance, different groups of people. They were bureaucrats. Some of them were more progressive than others. Some were quite royalist. So there were different factions within the Paiwat of 1932. And I think the idea of factionalism is something that really gets into understanding the Thai military, okay? And understanding that it's not one cohesive group, all right? So here's the long period. Okay, I'm jumping through things. No, actually I do talk about this very detailed. The 1932 to 1973, the military in this period evolved to dominate Thailand, actually. Because during the 1960s, I would say at least by the period of Prime Minister Thanom Kittikachorn, the military was quite dominant, all right? And how did it get that way? Well, structure and agency. The structure at the time was that the 1932 Paiwat created a political vacuum. It created a political vacuum that the military came to fill, because the military had the monopoly of force, the monopoly of violence, and there was not another institution that could fill that. At the same time, the military had friends abroad, such as Washington, that was looking for an anti-communist institution to protect Thailand and to protect the United States. Okay. But there was also an agency, structure and agency. Agency, you can see in the fact that there were some powerful, strong men who wanted power. Okay, I mean, it works together then. That helped the armed forces and the senior leadership in the armed forces become more and more powerful. Support from foreign governments like Japan, which I would say from 1936 to 1945, during that particular period, Japan was really supporting a strong army in the line of Bushido ideology, Japanese nationalism, and there was Thai nationalism as well. Okay. The result is that the military, and I'm sorry, after Japan, the United States. The result is that the military could lord over the country. So it starts with these chapter I call the initial Caesars. Okay, the initial Caesars of this, going through Prayapahon and Plagpibun Songkram, who I would say were part of a Young Turks faction. This was a Young Turks faction of the military. These were not generals who were leading the military of Ratchagan Tijed. No. These were intermediate level officers. Okay? And they are the ones who spearheaded, at least militarily, the fall of the absolute monarchy. And so if we look at it in that fashion, we need to understand their ideology. And they had quite an ideology of constitutionalism, yes, but also an ideology of nationalism, an ideology of Thainess, something that would be away from absolute monarchy. Okay. Some people have gone as far as to say fascism. You'll see in my book where I stand there. But of course, initially, it's Paiwat, but eventually, Pibun dominates the country, and through my book, I talk a great deal about Pibun and about how he gets closer and closer to the Axis powers, Japan, Germany, and Italy. And I think it's a good read, so I'll let you take a look in that. But of course, we know that the Axis lost World War II. And since they lost World War II, Pibun had to step down. And there was a chance and a period of time in which Thailand could have had a democracy from 1944 until 1947, because two institutions were weak at the same time during that period. Monarchy and military were very weak. Prit Panomyong tried to rebuild the military as a reformed, civilian-controlled military. So I do discuss this period in depth. Unfortunately, Prit's on the far left there. Unfortunately for Prit, the Cold War was beginning. And the United States began to see red where Pibun wanted to be progressive. You could say, well, he is supporting progressiveness in a way that appears communist. All right, and that did not help Prit. And so in my book, we do examine what happened when a man named Willis Byrd worked for the Office of Strategic Services and later for the CIA, gave weapons to General Pin Chunovan, to help overthrow the democratically elected government in November of 1947, which happened. Okay? And I think then something helpful about my book is to really write in the fact that the United States had a role to play. And this continues. The next chapter I call Tetrarchy. Tetrarchy, which was, if you ever read in the ancient Roman period about Constantine the Great, there were actually 4 emperors ruling at the same time. But what I'm trying to say is that during the period of the 1950s, there were 4 very powerful Thai senior military officials. Okay? Of course, the prime minister, it's Pibun. He came back again. Retired, of course. Okay? He's old, but still has influence. But the prime minister has to work with first he had the army commander Pin Chunovan, and Pin's son-in-law, Police General Pao Sianon. Okay? And then the very upcoming and probably the most powerful, I would say the most powerful Thai general in modern Thai history was General Sarit Thanarat. Okay, and my book goes through why I think Sarit was so powerful. We can talk about it in the Q&A if you like. But just in summary, I can say that Sarit is the one who really saved this regime time and again from any upstart military rebellion. Okay, and of course in 1954, Sarit became army commander. When Sarit became army commander in 1954, he reorganized the army. He reorganized it so that the three regions of the army gained a much more centralized status within the Corps. Okay, so he really verticalized power under the army commander in the process. Okay, so he had quite a role to play. Another role that was being played was the United States. Okay. General William Donovan, who had been the head of the Office of Strategic Services during World War II, became the ambassador to Thailand and really was working steadfastly to build and grow the Thai police, the Thai border police, and the Thai army. Donovan retired. His successor was a man named Purifoy, William Purifoy. Purifoy, as ambassador, was very important because his previous assignment in Guatemala, he had overseen the overthrow of a government for the CIA. So why was he in Thailand? Actually, he was there to try to boost up this border patrol police, boost the power of the police working with Pao Sihanouk, and make Thailand an able anti-communist ally. There was fear in Washington that Pibun might not be trustworthy because Washington did discover that Pibun had sent messages to Beijing. So there was certainly an interest in Washington to make sure Pibun did not go too far in that respect. During the period of the 1950s, yes, the CIA had operations through Thailand, Operation Paper. There was the Thai-U.S. Security Communique of 1962, which was a security alliance agreement. And then the United States troops were semi-permanently placed in Thailand from 1962 to 1976. Okay. But then there's the coup of 1957, which I like to call Sarit's stratocracy. What is a stratocracy? A stratocracy is rule by one. Okay? But it sounded kind of like alliteration. Sarit's. Okay, anyway. So what happened is 1957, there is a coup because throughout the 1950s, Sarit's power had constantly been growing. Okay? And Pibun was becoming not very liked by Washington. And so, at least in my book, I mean, there's different points of view. Washington greenlights the coup. And I have the information I have is from the CIA documents, from WikiLeaks, and from State Department documents on this. Okay. So I think this book helps to contribute to that. Okay. Sarit died quite young because he was not very healthy. Anyway, he dies in 1963. Okay. Which is very interesting because Prapat Jadusatian was not a good friend of Sarit. Was not close. During the rule of Sarit, Prapat had, by the way, Prapat is a senior general. Okay, just to give you the information. I'm already engrossed in this too much. There was a senior general named Prapat Jadusatian in the late 1950s, powerful, but Sarit began to have a problem with him. Okay. And so he demoted Prapat. Unfortunately, Sarit dies. Sarit's good friend is actually a future army commander named General Grit Sivara. What did happen is that when Sarit dies, Tanom Kitikajon, who is a general, is also the prime minister, he promotes Prapat back to be the army commander. Why? Well, look, Prapat's daughter is married to Tanom's son. So that's pretty convenient. And so we have the diarchy. What is a diarchy? A rule by two. A diarchy. And this diarchy between Tanom and Prapat lasts for 10 years. Okay? Yes, there were elections in 1969. But nevertheless, those elections ended up having Tanom becoming prime minister. These two ruled the whole 10-year period. Okay? And I think it's important for Thai history that we see that from 1957, it's a coup in 57, 58, a second coup, Sarit, all the way to 1973, you have basically these strong men dominating the country. And that meant that the institution of the military was entrenched in power. Notice I haven't been talking about the royal institution, partly because it didn't have that much power as it does now. Okay? The military was the dominant in Thailand. But we have to admit that in 1957, when Sarit staged his coup, he did increase the power of monarchy. Okay? And actually then we begin to see with Sarit's coup the growth of royalty in Thailand again. But still the military had a big voice, big influence throughout the 1960s. Okay? Why? Because it wanted power, yes. Secondly, institution of the traditional institution supported that. And finally, the United States supported it too. During the 1960s, there's the Vietnam War. And we needed to have the United States, I'm not saying we, I am American, but okay. The United States needed to have a reliable military ally in Thailand. By the way, that was, I'm sorry, the middle figure is Narong Kitikajon. If you were wondering, that's the son of Tanom. So what happens here? Well, first of all, I want to say that in 1973, General Grit Sivara becomes army commander. That's the man on the far left top. That's also the man who was close to Sarit Thanarat. Grit was the person in the position of army commander when there were mass demonstrations on October 14th, 1973. Okay? Many people have forgotten Grit, but I think it's important to remember him. So I have dedicated a lot of my book to Grit. Grit, his forces did attack the student demonstrators. All right? But he was ordered again to attack by the Tanom Prapat, duo, and Grit refused. He refused to attack. And in fact, he said, we need to save our children. Okay, so because he acted that way, you can say that Thailand did get a period of democracy, or a period of pluralism from 1973 to 76. But were there other people involved? Yeah. The person next to Grit is at that time, Colonel Witun Yasawat. Witun Yasawat, working with the CIA in Laos for 10 years, at least according to the documents I saw, arrived in Bangkok on 14 October. Another person who arrived was Hugh Tovar, the person in the middle, the CIA director who arrived there at time. So at least according to Witun himself, he said that he and his forces on October 14th fired weapons down at both the students and at the government forces. Okay. Now actually Naresuan Kittigajon has said something similar to this before. That's sort of a revisionist take on what happened on 14 October. Be that as it may, we know that there was a civilian government afterwards. 1976, a massacre. Hok Dula, right? How did Hok Dula happen? How could it happen? Well, one way it happened is because Grit Sivara died. He died in April of 1976. This was the man who had made sure there would not be a coup. He was against the coups. He wanted there to be civilian government that was lasting. But he died. And I think the reports that I read state that he complained of aches after eating khao niao mamung. That's why I don't ever eat khao niao mamung. But who knows? I mean, most military people live long lives. I mean, maybe the senior ones live long. Not all of them do, but some of them live to be quite, yeah, anyway. But he was, what, 60 or 61 years old, quite young. And he said, I had just come off the golf course. He was playing golf. Okay. It doesn't matter for this, though. After he died, all hell broke loose. All these military people wanted to have coups. Okay? So you had a lot of instability coming. Well, meanwhile, Washington was not averse to a coup. February 4th, 1976, CIA Director George H.W. Bush had been discussing that sort of thing. In a CIA document that I had, he said, first, support elections, and second, support a coup. Because actually there was going to be an election in April of 1976, and the idea was that if the right-wing party did not win, well, then we can support a coup. Okay? He said in the event of a military takeover, the resultant government would be sympathetic to the U.S. You got to remember, why would he say this? Why would Bush do this? Because the government of Coup Prit Pramod had been talking about dialogue with Hanoi, dialogue with the communists. Washington did not want to lose Thailand to a tailspin of communism. Before I get to that, so what did happen eventually Okay, I guess I don't have it on this PowerPoint. Henry Kissinger began to send more and more memos to the U.S. ambassador. When is there going to be a coup? Is the coup started yet? This is in July of 1976. Sounds like Chile, 1973. And that's when Kissinger also had been Secretary of State. Okay, so Thailand, we could say, there was a coup in October 6, 1976, following a massacre, and there might be, you can say, the United States did know something about that. Okay, now after the coup, though, Thanin Krawitchian became Prime Minister of Thailand. Okay, and it was a very interesting government. He was very royalist, very right-wing, and even too much right-wing for the military. And so, some military people wanted to overthrow Thanin. They wanted to stage a coup against him. Okay. Well, what happened is, and I found this in a WikiLeaks actually, at the Erawan Hotel, the United States officials met with Krieng Sak Chomanan and said, you know what, would you stage a coup against Thanin Krawitchian? Why? Because President Jimmy Carter, who was really big on human rights, wanted Thailand to have a government that was not seen as bloody like Thanin's government, because it was very repressive. Well, Krieng Sak actually did stage a coup. There's the U.S. ambassador with Thanin. And we can say here that military power was sort of resurrected. Arch-royalist Prim. So, I think it's a very interesting, very important. Prim is extremely important for the history of the Thai military. Why? For many reasons. But one reason, for sure, is that after 1981, in 1980, he came to power, 1981 coup, which failed. A coup against Prim failed. It failed because His Majesty supported Prim. After that happened in history, no coup was ever successful unless His Majesty supported it. Okay? If His Majesty did not support it, the coup could never be successful. From that point onward. So there was another coup attempt in 1985. Failed. Okay? So it shows you a sort of changing equilibrium in the power of these two institutions, the traditional institution and the military. Okay? Under Prim, then, and until the present, on the right side, institution becomes stronger than the military, period. We remember this. Okay. Sunton, Suchinda, and Black May. Okay. Yes. So after Prim is done in 1988, and then Chachai Chunavan is prime minister for a little bit, then there's a coup again. Okay. But this was a different time. Because in the late 1980s, early 1990s, in the world there's an uproar toward more democratization. Okay? So when the coup happened, 1991, in 1992, Demonstrations, mass demonstrations. What was the military's response? They fired into the crowd, killed a lot of people. But unfortunately, His Majesty did not support that. And after that, Suchinda, who had made himself prime minister, had to resign. We know the whole story. He resigned, and there were new elections. Okay? But this is very important for the military, because this event, Putsapatamen, Black May, where there was firing into the crowd, it tainted, it tarnished the image of the military, making it possible for a people's constitution to be enacted in 1997 during the period of first Chavalit and Chuan Lik Pai. Okay? So the military had to step back. And instead, we have, I'd call it a guided democracy. A guided democracy from 1992 to 2001 under the monarchy and the retired Army Commander Prim, who became the chair of the Privy Council. Okay. Was there no military involvement? Well, if you consider that Prim had been a retired military, yeah, there was. But it's a guided democracy. Four different prime ministers during this period. And then more recently, Thaksin comes along. Thaksin frustrated and upset the traditional powers. Okay. Thaksin appointed his own cousin to be army commander. He was able to do that because he had influence within the institution of the military. Thaksin had enormous influence in the police. So these powerful institutions worried. They worried. The power of Thaksin was worrying to the traditional powers. Okay. And so there was a coup in 2006. Sonti Bunyaratiglin staged the coup. Now, Sonti is from the Special Forces faction, based in Lopburi. Those forces are strong, but they are not the very strongest forces. So it's really the soldiers under Sonti who did the work of the 2006 coup. Who were those people? Well, mostly it was the first army commander, Anupong Pauchinda, General Anupong, and his deputy, General Prayut Chanocha, okay, who did the footwork of the coup. And so, when Sonti's coup occurred in 2006, the power of Anupong and Prayut grew. And it didn't hurt that the Budapest Payak faction, of which Anupong and Prayut are a part, was supported in many ways by Her Majesty. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the appointed Suriyut Chulanon, General Suriyut, who became the appointed prime minister of that period, and is a favorite of General Prim, Tenasulanon. So here we have it. Enter Prawit, Anupong, and Prayut. Who's Prawit? Who's Prit Wongsu? How did he get into this picture? Well, actually, Prawit is in the same class as Sonti Bunyaratiglin. Okay? So class matters. Factions matter in the Thai military. Also, Prawit is the P of Anupong and Prayut. All right? And he is a senior member of the Budapest Payak faction. So these three began to grow their power after 2006 coup. Here's some Thai cartoons. So you can see, this is supposed to be Samak, Prime Minister Samak on the far left. He's having an arm wrestling match with Anupong, okay? just to see. And another, I think this is also Anupong, who's rattling the, is that Somsak? And then finally, here, the military places opposite on the chair of the prime ministership. Okay, and finally, Yingluck is her appeasement policy toward the military. This is what the newspapers were talking about at the time. These are old newspaper articles. But from 2007 to 2014, there is a re-democratization because the junta that came to power after 2006, they went back to the barracks and they allowed elections to occur, but there was a very weakly organized democracy. The military had enormous power, much more than it did under Thaksin. Okay? In 2008, a new law comes into being that only the military can choose the reshuffles, okay, for the senior officials, not the prime minister. Okay, so that gives, for example, it's an example of the military's rising power. Okay, 2008 also, there is in December of 2008, some people say it was a silent coup. What happened was that when the Pheu Thai government was forced from office, a new government came to office under the Democrats, but it was negotiated, that government coming together was negotiated at the home of an army commander. Okay, so here again we see army influence. Another coup. Coup prone. May 2014, you see yet another coup and yet another junta. Okay. Why did this coup happen? Well, Yingluck Shinawatra had been the prime minister from 2011 to 2014. She was forced out of office in 2014 by a ruling from the judiciary. Okay. But, of course, there had been demonstrations in the streets for a long time. Some might argue there didn't need to be a coup in 2014 because Yingluck had already been forced out. Why have a coup? Well, the answer, at least from a lot of the people that I've talked to, is that this was a period in which the traditional institution was becoming weaker and the military needed to be in power during this period to stabilize the country. Okay? And so, there we have it, a coup. Now, just want to say, throughout my book, this is a history of army factionalism. You can see factions throughout the history of the country, and when you look at it, the book, you'll see sometimes there's army fusion, which is cohesion. Sometimes it's fission, which means lots of factions. Okay? Sometimes so fission or fusion. Fission or fusion. But whenever you have military fission, you can have coups. Okay? You can. If it's a fusion of military might, the coups are going to be more successful. Okay? So when the military is united while civilians are divided, then the military can often get its way. On the other hand, when civilians are united and the military is disunited, civilians can get their way. Nevertheless, it always comes down to the traditional institution, really. Most recently, I call it the Caangization of the senior Thai army officers. A new faction was created in 2018 called the Caangdang, the red rim of the white shirt. You see his red rim? The Caangdang. So if the monarch and the palace choose you to join this group of officers, you can join, and you will have the advantage for the highest positions in the military. Okay? Kawdang. The remaining soldiers, if they're not Kawdang, they're called Kawkyo, the green rim, which is just like basically all the remainers. All the rest are Kawkyo. So the very special soldiers are the Kawdang. And the Kawdang goes through a very grueling exercises to try to make sure they can graduate from this program. Once they graduate, it's going to be the Kawdang officers who get the highest positions at the top of the army. There are also some in the Supreme Command that are Kawdang. One thing I'll say, though, is that what I've heard recently, very recently, is that there are a less number of Kawdang. Very recently, it might be that they're being phased out. So more and more Kawkyo. But Army Commander General Panat, current Army Commander, is Kawdang. Okay. And General Amrit of the 1st Army Command is a Kawdang. These are very important Army positions. So we know through history, I'm just trying to show you military influence. Okay, Palang Pracharat was a political party. It is a political party, but it was created with help from some army officials. Okay. Another important person, besides these two, has been an army captain, Tamanat Prompao, which I talk about in my book, Tamanat, from Paiwat province. Okay. Today, military officials do have a role to play way, way high up. The royal household, the secretary of the royal household, is this man in the center, Satit Pongsukwimon. His deputy, here we have Apirat again. Okay? And then this person, who's the head of the Capital Security, one of the heads of the Capital Security Command, Chakrapo Puridev. Okay? So what we're seeing today is some changes at the very top. These officials are working way at the top, at the traditional institutions' connection with the army. Okay? But the army itself today, led by Army Commander Panat, is dominated by the Kawdang faction still. Okay. Other factions like the Budapa Payak and the traditional Wongtaiwan faction do have influence. Okay. But at this moment, they're under the power of the Kawdang. Why? Because the traditional institution favors it that way. What about much more recently? So there was an election in 2023, and Setta Thavisin became prime minister, and he appointed the first elected civilian defense minister, Sutin. Okay. So my friends in the military, they said they loved Sutin. And I said, why did you love it? They said, he doesn't know anything about the military. And now he's been replaced. And Setta has also been replaced. Who controls the military from the government? From the government. Who controls the military? Well, yes, the prime minister. Patongtan, right? Ung Ing, she's the prime minister. And the defense minister, Pumtam Wecha Yaichai. There are two reasons I heard why military people like him. Number one, they say he doesn't really know much about the military matters either. But number two, since he used to be in the Communist Party of Thailand, he doesn't have much support at all in the military. So they're not afraid of him. He does have the ear of Thaksin, though, so he is powerful in that respect. Phumtham is. But I think the military, just to make sure that Phumtham doesn't try to get too powerful, the military pressured the government to appoint General Natapon Notpanit as the deputy defense minister. This is a man who's close to Paiwat. So that means that Paiwat can monitor, or the military can monitor, whatever Phumtham is trying to do in the defense ministry. Does the army really care about the defense ministry? Yes, the army does care. However, you must remember that the army is the most powerful part of the Thai military. Okay? Not the Air Force, not the Navy, not the Royal Thai Armed Forces headquarters. The budget that they get is nothing compared to the army is huge. So it's really the army commander, General Panat, who has the most power. And let's look at him. There he is. General Panat is connected to the Wongtaiwan faction, very royalist faction, and has a history of being very close to His Majesty. Okay? What's also interesting about him, he used to command the 1st Army Region, which gives him a lot, which is Bangkok in the surrounding areas, which gives him a lot of respect from the army officials. Okay? Finally, Panat retires in 2027, which means that's a long time for an army commander. He can be here 2 more years. Okay. And so he will finish his job in October of 2027 after the next Thai general election. So if there's something that goes wrong for the conservatives in the next general election, Panat will still be there. Okay. Somebody who can stabilize. Over here on the left is Songwit Nunpakdi, son of coup maker Sunthorn, back in 1991. A very able, very well-educated supreme commander, but the Royal Thai Armed Forces headquarters doesn't have as much power as the army commander. Okay. Now, what could happen next year, it's possible, because Songwit has to retire next year. It's possible that if Panat does something that somebody doesn't like, he will be moved into this position that Songwit has, and then Assistant Army Commander Jitsanupong could become the Army Commander next year. He also retires in 2027. That's something to watch for. Another person that's very important is General Amrit, the commander of the 1st Army Region. Whoever is the commander of the 1st Army Region decides coup. Because it's all of the military forces next to Bangkok, or in Bangkok. Okay? Except the Capital Security Command of the king. Finally, let's go over here. This is the Air Force commander. The Air Force commander and Panpakdi and the new Navy commander, Jirapon, they are both very royalist. They will both retire next year, even though they were just appointed. So that means that next year there will be 3 major new positions available. Finally, I want to make mention of the new police commander Kittirat. Okay, Kittirat is very close to former police commander Suwat, Jang Yod-suk, a very avowed arch-royalist police official. However, just to say, since the Patongtan government came to office, the Chinawat faction in the police has grown in enormous influence, except for this police commander. So that's an interesting situation that you see Thaksin's power growing in leaps and bounds in the police, perhaps because he has a lot of police influence, but not in the military yet. Possible future coup? Well, I would say this is more like a judicial coup. There could be a judicial coup if, for example, because this could be a question, might as well answer it here. If Thaksin overreaches against the aristocracy, okay, it's happened before. Sometimes Thaksin goes too far, makes powerful people angry. If he does it this time, I think what could happen is simply he will be found guilty of violating 112 and leave the country. That's all that has to happen. There doesn't need to be a military coup, okay? But there's one other possibility of a coup. If the People's Party, Pak Prachachon, wins a landslide victory in the next general election, and of course this party wants monarchical reform and military reform. If it wins the general election, yeah, there could be a military coup, okay? But the next general election will be probably 2027, a couple of years. Okay. And right now, if you've noticed, Thaksin is going all over the country trying to boost his popularity just to make sure maybe Pheu Thai could win. They might. Pheu Thai could win the election, not Pak Prachachon. Okay. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Another party, of course, to look at is the Boonjai Thai Party, which has many military supporters. So basically, today, I'd say Thailand has experienced 14 successful military coups. And why does the military stage coups? Why? Well, number one, in many times in the past, the military is an agent of royal interests. In other words, maybe a royal person wants a coup, and so a coup happens. Okay? That's really maybe since the days of Prim. But that's not the only reason. I would be myopic to say, oh, that's only this one institution causes the coup. No. Also, the military and military people view themselves as having a right to determine Thai society. If you look at the history of the Thai military, okay, back in 1932, they were the change agent that ended the absolute monarchy. They were the change agent that ended Thaksin, okay, in 2006. They know that. They think many of them think they have a right to do that. And some people in society who are not military also think the military has a right, okay? So this is sort of a psychological factor. Number three, the military can enhance its power across time by constantly cooing. Cooing is a verb, by the way. Institutional power, legal powers can be changed. Maybe the civilians put some law into effect against the military, stage a coup. That constitution's gone, right? It happens. Finally, and this gets to my other book, military officials and the military has khaki capital economic interests. There are certainly business interests. Okay, economics matters. Conclusion, and I know you've been waiting for it. For the future, I'd say the military remains pervasive enough to take over at any time, if allowed to do so by the palace. I mean, if the palace does not want that, the military is not going to take over. Number two, persevering military power derives from endorsement by the traditional institution, but also huge budgeting of the military. Huge budget. Okay? And various legal decrees. And just to say, with regard to that budget, I would go so far as to say that the situation in Thailand's deep south, which is this insurgency and counterinsurgency, it gives the military a rationale to continue having an enormous budget, which gives the military a reason to remain very relevant and powerful. Okay? Number three, there are many factions in the Thai military. And through the Kaw Dang faction, the palace has made an effort to control these factions. Number four, though political parties have sought to implement military reform, I don't see that coming anytime soon. And number five, Thailand's long history of military interventions has socially constructed Thai society to accommodate what I think is today a Praetorian Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much ครับ Thank you very much ครับอาจารย์ Paul. If I may ask you to just remain here at the front just for a few more moments for some moments of question and answer. We have some microphones here. Given how large of a crowd we have today, I would say, may I propose that we could do maybe 2 questions at a time, no? So that maybe all of us who would like to ask question can ask question, please. Questions? So one there and the gentleman. So one, yeah.
Thank you. I would like thank you, Dr. Chambers, for your lecture tonight. Elucidate many issues that we think about a lot, I suppose. I wonder if you could, if you've had to have a sense of the influence of money in the power of various military factions and how factions evolve and what the public. Sorry, I think there. Let's go. And second question, you said we could ask 2.
As in, it's fine.
Okay.
We'll do 3 then. As in like one person, 1 question, and 2 questions at a time. But yes, please.
Okay. How much power does the monarchy have actually in terms of military force or physical force? What would you how estimate the actual more than spiritual power than it does? Thank you.
And Lisa.
Thank you very much. I would like to commend you for your readings of the CIA papers and thereby revealing the kind of the influence of the United States government in various situations. I think that is a really good revelation. It's terrific. One thing I wanted to ask you is that as a principal advisor to government for 4 decades, my impression of many coups, not all, was that the reason it has been bloodless and successful is because the military was really doing the wishes of the people. In other words, the situation of government became so terrible that the people supported a kind of change in government, and the military was the mechanism abiding by the wishes of the people. That's why you see people sometimes give flowers to the military. So I just wanted to see your impression on that. Thank you.
Before I forget the questions, let me answer them. 3. Okay, I'll start factions. Okay, yeah, factions in the Thai military are many, and there have been ideological factions, right? There have been factions based around a personality. There's factions based around a unit. Okay, and so and there are others, but in terms of the ideological faction, I would say that the Young Turks faction of the late 1970s and early 1980s, or the Democratic Soldiers faction, are examples. So there have been this type of faction. Then there are factions around a certain personality, like you could often see a very charismatic general with lesser generals surrounding. These are often smaller factions. Okay? And then what I like to get at is the unit factions. So if you look at the 2nd Infantry Division, okay, which is in eastern Thailand, that's a Budapest Payak, the Eastern Tigers. So the unit factions are very important. And then, if you get to look at the 21st Regiment, within that Budapest Payak, that's called the Queen's Tiger Guard faction. It's all based on unit. You can have situations where someone is a member of a certain sub-faction, but not another faction. Okay, Prit Wongsu, he is a member of the Budapest Payak faction, but he never did command the 21st Regiment, and so he's not considered part of the, or as a leading member of the Tiger Guards faction. So these factions are very important, and the cohesion of these factions is what can drive unity within the army. For your question about I got to be careful of that kind of question. Let me just say that if you look at the Thai Constitution, I believe it's Article 3, the armed forces are under the king. So that tells you the power of the military right there. I'm sorry, the power of the king right there. He is the commander. Okay, and I don't think I'm violating 112 by quoting the Constitution. Okay, let me go. We'll talk about it later, maybe. Yeah, and yes, Professor, you make a good point. In my readings on all of the coups, they have been quite popular. For example, the 1957 coup, people wanted Pibun out. Okay, there were so many people demonstrating for the end of Pibun, and there was a coup. There was a coup. Also, Chachai Chunavan was, they talked about his buffet cabinet. People, there were some problems with Chachai. So, but what I would say is that there are some immediate factors and some not so immediate factors. They're important, but not the most important for the coup. And so I would say that the popular opposition to the government, which led to the coup, is important, but not the leading reason for the coup. So I agree with you. And when you read my book, you'll see. Okay, thanks for the question.
More questions? So one there and one there. No.
All right. Why is your book, I have to ask this, why is your book not a violation of lèse majesté?
Well, I would say it's not. Oh, did you want to ask 3 or no?
Let's do 2, maybe.
2,
The
okay.
gentleman in the back.
And I have time to-
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Do you track all of the military towards Thai policy towards Burma and towards the Burma military and the Burma resistance?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of it. Could you say?
Do you track the role of the Thai military towards Thai foreign policy towards Burma, and particularly with the Burmese military, but now, particularly currently now, but both the military and the Burmese resistance?
The answer is in old days. I do. I look at it in the old days, so not like in 2025. The book was published in 2024, and I haven't really looked at it so much. I think it may be a little bit, but not so much since the Rataprahan, the coup in Burma. But what I did do is look at, for example, relations between General Ne Win and General Sarit, because they knew each other. Okay, it's kind of interesting. And when Tan Om was prime minister, Ne Win came and played golf in Thailand. So they were interesting relations. General Krieng Sak, Chomanan, had relations with some folks, sometimes nefarious, in Burma. Anyway, it's scattered though. I wouldn't say the book is focusing on Thai Myanmar military relations. That's a new book that I'm going to start writing. But it does have scattered references. And meanwhile, the question that you asked me, I try to coat such references in my book. You'll see. If you read the book, I think you'll like it, but it does get to what you're talking about, but it doesn't do so in a very obvious, in-your-face way. I had talked to some people about doing that to make it worth it. Yeah, I don't want to go to jail. No. Next question.
The gentleman on the right, yes, sir.
Hi. You mentioned the creation of the army in the 30s, wasn't? No, sorry, in the
1852.
Right.
1852.
Could you also speak? Not militaries are winning in every nation. Or he's dying. I'll just. Can you speak to the traditions of professionalism and discipline in the military? Where are they closest to? Is there another army? A lot of armies in Asia were based, modeled on militaries and structured on those in Europe. The U.S. military has its traditions. And as a second part of that, which military now would you compare it to? Which is it closest to in terms of its discipline, hierarchy, and professionalism?
Very good question. And the answer is Prussia. So, as my book points out, the main faction in the Thai army initially was the Prussia faction. It was called the Kaiser faction. Because Germany was a new country, but Germany was really respected in books and in writings by leading Thai military and also the princes that were working with the military at that time, to the extent that Siam sent many officers to Germany for their education. You know, even Ratchakan Tipad was sent to Germany. Others were sent to Germany. Paiwat was sent to Germany. You know, it's like very much respected. And so, if you look at Germany and the Kaiser faction, that's really the ways, the ideas, the narratives within the Thai army at the time were coming out from Prussia, really. Today, well, it's interesting. So since 1948, the United States has been a major role model for a Thai military education, the West Point system. Okay. And that has continued. You know, the United States has this IMET program where you can learn, study methods of military. Not just the United States, the Thai military also studies in Australia and other places. But I think China is becoming an alternative for very recent Thai military. In terms of military education, you continue to see Thai military officers studying in the United States, Australia, other countries, but China. And China is welcoming more and more Thai military. It's cheaper, and it's an alternative when there's been U.S. conditionality for aid and U.S. sort of browbeating Thailand for staging coups and sort of things like that. It's like Thailand doesn't want interference, and China's an alternative.
I think we have time for two more questions. Yes, two more questions, please.
Yeah. Professor, sorry, at the back here.
Yeah.
You made some very pointed references earlier on to U.S. involvement in the coups. What is the role of the United States these days? And related to that, could you perhaps also talk a little bit about the role of the big business families in the power games that involve the military as well?
Sorry, there was one more hand just in front of the gentleman, just on the final row. You raised your hand, right? Sorry, sir. There was one more question.
Oh, it was a mistake.
Same question. Okay, perfect. Yes.
Okay. Good questions. So really, since Putsapatamin, since 1992, which is actually since the end of the Cold War, the United States is not interfering like it was in terms of staging coups. The only real actions of the United States that I've detected in recent periods was the period post 9/11 when the United States worked with Thailand to interrogate suspected terrorists in black ops places. But I don't know about this new administration in Washington, but I don't think they would. There's an interest in that. There's not a Cold War like it was back then, okay? And so I don't see the United States getting involved like it was in terms of intervening, ousting governments, staging coups, etc. As for the big business, there has been interesting connections between business and military, okay? And one of those is, I guess you could say, is the 5 Provinces Foundation of Prit Wongsu, okay? This started as a royal project in 2006, but it's in eastern Thailand. It's a huge amount of land, forests, but there have been profits coming out of this vast acreage, which, according to members of the People's Party, went into the one of the conservative political parties. Went into Prit's political party. Okay, so you can see business has worked with military. I talk about that in my other book, Khaki Capital. So take a look at that.
Let's do one final question. Yeah.
One thing that you did not mention this evening was the importance of military classes. You talked a lot about factions, but when I first came to Thailand in 1986, the different classes at the military academy were extremely important. Do you still see that today?
I have to apologize to you. That is a glaring dearth in my lecture. Certainly, Class factions are extremely important. And the most important classes are in the Pre-Cadet Academy, which was founded in 1957. And so when you see the classes of Chula Chom Klau Army Academy or the Navy Academy or the Air Force Academy or the Police Academy, they are important, but Pre-Cadet Academy is more important because all of the security officials are supposed to attend the Pre-Cadet Academy. Well, Police, Class 10, okay? So under the understanding of the traditional military and police, Class 10 people can get together and pressure something forward, okay? Today, by the way, Paiwat, Class 12. Whenever there were reshuffles and the Prime Minister could influence those reshuffles, he'd want to influence it towards a class getting the positions that's favorable to that Prime Minister, right? The class of Apirat, Kong Songpong, is Class 20, okay? So he always tried to make sure someone from Class 20 was there. The class of Panat, the Army Commander now, is Class 26. So you're going to see Class 26 very, very important. One thing I'd like to say is that Class 28 is going to become an up-and-coming class, and that's because it's the class of Jakarpo Putadet. It's also who is a very powerful person with military connections, right? I mentioned him earlier. Class 28 is huge. It's a huge class. And so we're likely to see major cohesive military maneuvers or actions through this class. Okay. I mentioned General Amrit, the First Army Commander. But the problem with him, he's unfortunately in Class 27, which is sort of a weak class. But classes are very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the questions. So just before we draw a conclusion to this lecture, the lecture committee have a small token of appreciation to give to you. Let's go to the center of the way.